So growing up, I was a massive fan of the Nintendo GameCube, as that console alone was just filled to the brim with so many great games, with one of them being my personal favorite being Luigi's Mansion. I played through this game a lot back in the day, and honestly I still play through it even to this very day. Now the game itself is fairly simple, as it's mostly Luigi trying to explore this haunted mansion, and I feel like that simplicity really helped this game in the long run, especially since this game is very short and honestly has a pretty good pace to it. Really makes Luigi's Mansion honestly one of the most replayable Nintendo games of all time. Especially with the ambience alone, which is honestly to this very day something you would never see out of a Mario game. And then 10 years later we would get Luigi's Mansion 2 Dark Moon. And unironically, back in the day, this was probably one of my most hyped Nintendo games of all time, period. As again, I really adore Luigi's Mansion, so to see them making a sequel was something very unexpected, but very exciting. And when it finally came out, it was one of my most played 3DS games ever. Although looking back, I honestly still think I prefer the first one a lot more. But despite that, I still think Luigi's Mansion 2 is still a pretty good game, and I really like how they were able to re-release this game on Nintendo Switch. And with Luigi's Mansion 1 coming to the NSO really soon, we can play the entire Luigi's Mansion series under one console, which is very cool. But then 5 years later, we would then jump all the way to 2018, where, interestingly, during the hype of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, one of the characters was Simon Belmont. And while people were very hyped for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate thanks to this Nintendo Direct, there was just one thing I was very pondering about it, which was Luigi in that scene where he gets brutally killed by the Grim Reaper. As the poltergeist that Luigi used in the trailer looked very different compared to the past two ones, and now it can shoot plungers? I'll be honest, this trailer alone basically confirmed that there was a new Luigi's Mansion on the way. And lo and behold, with the very next Nintendo Direct, they revealed Luigi's Mansion 3. And oh man, I was freaking stoked with this one. As not only it's another Luigi's Mansion game, but also it's the very first one in the series to be in full-on HD. Now just like with Dark Moon, this game was developed by Next Level Games, which is a studio that worked with Nintendo for a very long time now. As back then, they were mostly known for the Mario Strikers games, as well as that very cool Punch-Out reboot. But I guess these days you can basically consider them as like the Luigi's Mansion studio. In fact, after the release of this game, that was when Nintendo decided to finally buy out Next Level Games. And so now they're a first-party studio for Nintendo. Now, after the big success of Luigi's Mansion 2 on the 3DS, that was when Next Level decided to try to work on a sequel for the Wii U. But after wrapping up with Metroid Federation Force, this is when they decided to take shift for the Nintendo Switch because the Wii U was... do I have to say it? But anyway, so I think the funniest thing is that when they first announced it, they were having Luigi's Mansion 3 as just like the working title. But then when they fully unveiled the game, they were just like, screw it, we're just keeping it Luigi's Mansion 3. But yeah, this was the main game for Nintendo in 2019. And honestly, that was a pretty solid year for Nintendo, as they had pretty good stuff like Yoshi's Crafted World, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and the Link's Awakening remake. But it was this one that was easily my most anticipated game for that year. And I have a lot of things to say about this game. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the story begins with Luigi, Mario, Peach, and three Toads on a bus. As Luigi was invited to a luxurious hotel and brought his friends and family along to enjoy the stay. He even brought in his pet dog during the adventure. That's honestly pretty cute. I honestly really adore Polterpup, so seeing him return this game, I just really like that, and I like the fact how he's just straight up Luigi's pet in this game. But anyway, so the gang arrives at the hotel and they decide just to chillax around the lobby. And this is when you get to take control of Luigi, as you can just wander around and see what's going on. And even though there's not actually anything to do in the lobby, I like how this area is just full of nice detail. Like, I love the fact that Mario's first instinct was immediately going to the buffet, as he really has this tantalizing expression as he looks at the food.
Oh. Hey, bro. Doggy.
I do not know why, but that doggy line has been living my head rent-free lately. Anywho, so as you enjoy the sides, you will notice that some things are a bit off around this area, as all the employees around the areas look very off, as you can clearly tell that they're wearing masks. Especially this guy. You know, with Luigi's personality always being very scared with a lot of things, I'm kind of surprised that he's not scared with this thing, because what the hell is this? What the hell is that face? But anyway, so as soon as you're done looking around the lobby and decides to check in, the hotel owner decides to arrive to greet the guests, which is this mysterious lady named Helen Gravely. She congrats Luigi on being invited to the hotel as she then tours everyone to their rooms.
Night night.
Night night.
God damn, this game is charming. But anyway, so as soon as you enter the room, there's really not that much to do around here besides checking the place out. But it does answer the biggest question people had with this game. Are you able to pet the dog?
Puppy. Aw, Poga Pop.
But anywho, so Luigi decides to wind down in bed, where he tries to read a book but immediately crashes out. But then, later that night, this is when shit hits the fan, as Luigi immediately wakes up after hearing Peach screaming in the other room. And not just that, but also the entire hotel transformed into a luxurious place into a complete and utter nightmare, with Luigi's room being filled with scary pranks. And when he leaves, he literally sees the entire hotel transform before his eyes. And I've really gotta say, I really love this opening. Like, it doesn't have the exact same ambience that you would get from the first game, but it does have very nice tension, especially when you try to investigate Mario and Peach's room, which is completely empty. It also looks like Mario has eaten too much pizza for his own good. But anyway, so as Luigi tries to investigate, he suddenly hears the elevator door open, as Helen Gravely then suddenly arrives, where it turns out that she's not even human, but in reality she's actually a ghost, and this whole thing was a trap by her, as her main motivation is trying to lure Luigi to the hotel to appease her idol, which so happens to be the returning King Boo, where not only he captured Mario again, but also he captured the Toads and Peach. But he doesn't really care about them, as his main target this time is just going after Luigi. And so he gives chase to the Green Plumber as he barely escapes to the laundry chute, as the scene then shifts to the hotel as it transforms into this haunted resort, leading to a title card. But anyway, so Luigi escapes as he's now in the laundry room, and as he tries to investigate, he then finds this card that holds a poltergeist. And so now with something to actually defend himself with, he then tries to investigate around the hotel, but eventually finds Professor Egad trapped in a painting, where Luigi was able to rescue him. Where it turns out that Egad was also invited to the hotel, which is how she was able to free King Boo. And so it's now up to Luigi to investigate the entire hotel to save his friends and family. A fairly straightforward story that honestly gets the job done pretty well. I honestly like the inclusion of stuff like Helen Gravely, because it's very nice seeing like a new Mario villain like this, even if she's basically like the secondary antagonist in this game. And even though the main plot of this game itself is very simple, it does elevate with a lot of great scenes, as each of the floors will have Luigi in these weird scenarios. Plus, it's very nice to see characters like Professor Egad again, because he's not really a character that appears in a lot of Mario games these days. So I'm very glad that he returns in this game. And also, I don't know why, but I kind of find it funny when Luigi tells Egad that Mario and Friends has been captured again, because you can clearly tell that he just seems very annoyed about the whole thing. He's basically like, oh man, this guy's really gonna make me stay here. Now, jumping all the way to gameplay. The best way to describe it is that it's basically a much more refined version of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, but also including some elements from Luigi's Mansion 1. Most of Luigi's arsenal from Dark Moon returns to this game, so stuff like the Dark Light device that reveals invisible objects, as well as the strobe light, which allows you to flash a huge light. All of that returns to this game, but this time, since we're jumping from the 3DS to Nintendo Switch, the actual movement itself feels a lot more like with Luigi's Mansion 1 instead of 2, since we're back to dual analog sticks. And it honestly plays like a dream. Like, seriously though, I feel like Luigi's Mansion as a series is just built with dual analog sticks. Although, since we're jumping from the Poltergeist 5000 to the G00, this means that Luigi has a few things up his arsenal, like being able to do this small little burst, which causes this gust of wind around Luigi as he can jump in the air for a little bit, which is probably the closest thing in these Luigi's Mansion games where he can actually jump. And other than that, there's also the suction shot, which allows Luigi to shoot plungers out of his flashlight. That way it can latch onto objects where Luigi can either pull it or slam it, which frankly is a very nice new feature. Like, there's something more satisfying of grabbing onto something and then slamming it onto another object. And then lastly, and this is probably the biggest one, we have Gooigi, who is a gelatinous clone of Luigi who can do things that Luigi usually couldn't. Stuff like going through pipes or grates, or it can even help Luigi out with some things like trying to lift a heavier object. He's a very useful mechanic where the game really goes all out on, as the hotel is just filled to the brim with secret areas that Luigi can find that leads to cool treasure. But of course, since this is a Luigi's Mansion game, there's also going to be a lot of ghosts to capture. If you're familiar with Luigi's Mansion, then you know the drill. As capturing the ghosts in this game works exactly like Dark Moon, that's probably a sentence I've been saying a lot in this video. As you use the strobe light to stun the ghosts and try to reel them in. Although, instead of having like that special burst in Dark Moon, Luigi this time outright slams the ghosts on the floor multiple times. Like, Jesus Luigi, I know you don't like ghosts, but man. But yeah, trying to suck up multiple ghosts at once while slamming on the ground is very fun to do so. And I also like how they brought back some ideas from Dark Moon, like some of the ghosts having special items that protect them from getting stunned. So you need to find other ways to catch them off guard. With the only thing I'm a bit iffy on are probably the ghost lineups themselves, as most of the ghosts in this game are basically like the ones from Luigi's Mansion 2. Like, the basic blue ghosts are exactly like the greenies, and doubly so for the red ones, who are exactly like in Dark Moon, but this time they've been converted into the Haunted Mattress. Although granted, actually capturing them are a bit more tricky now because you actually have to suck them up from behind. The basic enemy lineup in this game is mostly fine. I think I'm just a bit more 50-50 on stuff like their personalities in this game. I really love how well animated in this game they are, and sometimes they do give me a good chuckle, like this one section where they try to scare Luigi. But since Luigi is an expressionless blob, the ghost is just more confused on why it's not scared. But at the same time, I feel like they kind of make them a bit too goofy in this game. Like, personality-wise, I still kind of prefer the original ones a lot more. Because even though, like, they weren't, like, outright scary, they were still pretty intimidating just because how aggressively feral they are. While in stuff in 3, it's mostly just the ghost going, "Roar!" and Luigi going, "Wah!" They even outright dab in one moment in this game. But anyway, so as for the main progression in this game, in Luigi's Mansion 3, it's divided into 16 different sections. As the ghosts stole all the elevator buttons, and the only way to get them back is for Luigi to explore the areas and try to find them. And I like how even though that you're located in a hotel, that didn't really stop the developers of having Luigi explore very weird areas, as each of the floors will have you going through distinct areas. Like, for the first part of the game, you're going through areas that you would expect out of a hotel, like stuff like a shopping mall or a diner, but as you progress through the game, the more and more the floors feel a lot more surreal. Like, later on, one of the floors is going through a medieval castle, or an Egyptian tomb, which really gives the areas in this game feel very refreshing. And I feel like what also helped is that this game has a pretty good pacing just like in the original Luigi's Mansion. Because one of the main issues with Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is that since it was focused on a mission structure, it caused the game to have a big issue when it comes to pacing, but luckily with 3 that was mostly fixed. And it's a good thing too, because literally every single room in this game is just filled to the brim with different secrets. Like, seriously though, try to interact with literally everything you can see, because most likely you'll find a secret passage which leads to stuff like treasure, and my god, this game has so much money. Like, seriously though, there is nothing more satisfying in this game than vacuuming up so much money. Just money everywhere! Money, 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 ah! All I can say is that in Luigi's Mansion 4, I hope to god they have a scene where Luigi just jumps into a pool full of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. But anyway, so yeah, most of the floors in this game are really good. I think my favorite ones are probably the movie theater one, where it's basically one big puzzle. As there's 4 rooms with movie setups and a blue screen, and when you look into it, that's when the whole thing clears up. With the main puzzle is trying to find a way to burn this giant spider web. There's also this one where you're going through a building that's over-vegetated, which weirdly reminds me of something like out of The Last of Us. And then finally there's this cool magician floor where every single room in this game has a unique magic trick. And I especially love the ending where all the rooms has been shuffled down, so one door will lead to a completely different door, as you frantically try to find your way back. Now, not all the floors in this game are complete winners. Like, I'm not really too big on stuff like the boiler room, where you constantly need going back and forth with Luigi and Luigi as Luigi just drifts away through this goopy water. Although, admittedly, it's very funny seeing Luigi just daze as he's just being plummeted to a bunch of spikes, as you're mostly going through all these floors to find the various boss ghosts. Alright, so going back to stuff like the ghost lineup. So even though that the regular ghost enemies are just basically the same as from Dark Moon, this game does heavily make up for that by returning the boss ghosts, which basically act like the Portugos from the first game. Although instead of being designated to stuff like one room, instead the boss ghosts are basically the main antagonists for each of the floors. Like when you're trying to explore the medieval castle area, the main villain is this king ghost, and no, not that king ghost. Or as you try to explore the haunted mall area, it's being guarded by this mall cop. where, I'm not kidding, every time I see this guy, I just immediately laugh because it is quite literally just Paul Blart Mall Cop. Like, all I can see is just freaking Kevin James. Although sometimes with some of the floors, they aren't necessarily full-on levels, but more so boss arenas. And these are the places where all the toads are being captive. And what makes these boss goes a bit more unique is that the bosses themselves have a lot bigger scale compared to the other ones. Like with one of them, you're literally fighting a giant dinosaur skeleton. And then later on in the game, you enter this giant pirate ship, which actually is probably one of the few instances where this game actually did scare me. As the entire ship is literally being possessed by a ghost, as it basically can make this terrifying face, which reminds me a lot of Monster House. But I feel like my favorite ghost in this game is easily with Morty, as he's mostly just a film director who wants his megaphone back, and he's the only ghost in this game that's actually friendly towards Luigi. And when Luigi helps Morty make a movie, he just gives him the button with no issue. Morty, you're pretty cool. Alrighty, so for some of the much more randomer stuff. So throughout the game, Professor Egat will provide Luigi with different types of equipment. In Luigi's Mansion 1, he gave Luigi this device called a Game Boy Horror, and then in the second one, he got upgraded to the dual screen. But now in 3, Professor Egad gives Luigi a brand new device called the Virtual Boy. And yes, it's exactly that by name, it's a freaking Virtual Boy. So now stuff like the UI and how Professor calls Luigi is just in black and red. That's freaking amazing. He also gives Luigi this special device which allows him to teleport back into the lab, where there's nothing really too crazy in the lab, it's mostly just for extra stuff. But it's very nice that they have this feature, especially it cuts down the backtracking significantly. But other than that, occasionally you also need to escort some of these toads that you rescued. And they basically mechanically work as the same thing as in Dark Moon. I like how you can still grab one of the toads and just shoot them out in the air. Like in the museum section, you can literally shoot a toad into a glass case to shatter it. And I do not know why, but I find that very funny. Now, so far I talked about the game in a very positive light. The gameplay loop in Luigi's Mansion 3 is very fun and satisfying. And even though that the theme and tone is not exactly like the original game, it still has a very fun and charming personality. But there's only one area in this game where I feel like that kind of falls flat. As later on in the game in 2 sections, this game will ask you to backtrack in previous floors. As Helen has this special ghost cat which steals one of the elevator buttons from Luigi. And so because of this, you need to track him down in the exact same way as you did with the Polterpup in Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. Which wouldn't sound too bad, but the problem is that the game asks you to go through multiple floors sometimes. Which honestly kind of break up the pacing for me sometimes. As you're quite literally going through the exact same areas you've been through before, but this time just finding one cat. Like, I wouldn't really mind backtracking too much, like there's this one section where you need to head back into the boiler room. But what helped with that section is, for one, it's mostly an escort mission as you try to guide this toad back into the elevator. And second, you're traversing through areas that you haven't been through before. Although admittedly, I do like the scene when Polterpup arrives and he really wants to play with the Polterkitty. And I like how throughout this entire section, he's just with Luigi, as he just simply sits in the middle of the elevator like a good little boy. And also, does anyone remember the Boos? As they are back in this game, but honestly in a fairly lame way. As they're mostly relegated to just like optional side quest enemies, where throughout the floors there's going to be one Boo hidden within the furniture and the only way to find them is basically exactly the same as the first game, where it's basically one old hot and cold game. But the problem is how they implement them feels a bit more half-baked. I mean, quite literally, there's only one Boo where you actually have to capture within the story. But at the very least, they're still pretty fun to find. I do kind of find funny that the only way to defeat these Boos is that you have to slam them on the ground like the ghosts. But what makes it funnier is how much more aggressive Luigi is with the Boos. Like, you can literally feel Luigi's resentment as he slams the Boos to the ground. Now, jumping all the way to presentation for this game, hot damn. You know, this is probably not going to be a hot take to say, but Luigi's Mansion 3 is unironically the most impressive looking Nintendo game I've ever seen. Like, it is freaking amazingly impressive how good this game looks on the Nintendo Switch. As there's just so much detail everywhere in this game. And man, Luigi, Mario, Peach, they never really looked this good before. Especially with the animation quality, which always was an aspect that Nextlevel Games was always good at, even during like the GameCube era. But Mansion 3 really takes it to a whole new level. Like, this literally looks like something animated from Pixar. I especially love the subtle details, like when Luigi gets extra terrifying, he has like this very stiff animation. Or every time you capture one of the ghosts, they have this one animation where they try to escape only for them to get sucked up in the vacuum. And the music of this game also is very good. I like how most of the soundtrack of this game has like that very ghostly feel to them. Especially the remix for Egad's Bunker, which has like this very noir jazz feel. And I really gotta give huge credits to Charles Martinet in this game, as Luigi's Mansion 3 was one of the few final games that he worked on. And honestly, for the final Luigi's Mansion game that he was a part of, he saved his best performance for last because this is easily one of his best performances in any Mario game. Where even though that Luigi doesn't really talk a lot in this game, you can really tell that Charles really went all out in this game, making Luigi feel very bumbling but also very endearing.
Yeah. Ho ho. Nice. Hello? Whoa. Got it. Yeah. Luigi. Oh yeah. Oh, good puppy. Yap, yap. Ah. No, you're nice, kitty.
Now, before wrapping things up, I feel like it's very appropriate to talk about this game's multiplayer mode. As just like in Luigi's Mansion 2, there's this multiplayer mode in 3 called Scare Scraper, where you and a bunch of friends will play these multicolored Luigis as they explore a motel, with each of the floors having you doing a different task, like if one of them is clearing out all the ghosts, while others is going to be stuff like escorting toads or collecting all the gold. Although for some reason, the treasure hunting mission was the part where me and some folks were struggling. This mode also got surprisingly paid DLC down the line, which included a bunch of new minigames as well as new skins for Luigi. And I do not know why, but I really love seeing Luigi in a freaking disco outfit like that. Now I think the biggest surprise for me in this game is that if you actually get to the near end of the Scare Scraper round, there's actually an original boss fight as you have to face on with the returning Boolosses, which is honestly a pretty cool deep cut, and how you capture them is basically the same way, where you need to shatter them into multiple pieces and basically capture them piece by piece. Honestly, a pretty solid multiplayer mode throughout.
Wow.
Alrighty, so to finally wrap things up for this spooktastic adventure, after Luigi braved his way throughout the entirety of the haunted hotel, he finally reaches to the penthouse, which is the location that Helen Gravely is hiding out in, and not just that, but also, she has Mario hanged on her wall. And so, the only way for Luigi to rescue Mario is to find his way to Helen Gravely's office. And I've gotta say, out of all the locations in this game, this section here reminds me a lot of Luigi's Mansion 1. As your main goal is very simple, as you just need to find the 4 keys to enter Helen Gravely's office. And while you're exploring the penthouse, you really get a good idea how much Helen really appreciates King Boo. Like, she has freaking trash cans all over the place that's themed after King Boo. She quite literally has self-shipping portraits all over her walls. And for some reason, she has a replica of Gloomy Manor from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon in her room. I really love this area, and I like how every time you get a key, the security of this place gets more and more aggressive. Like, it literally feels like Luigi is going through a Mission Impossible section with all these lasers he needs to dodge. And when Luigi collects all the keys and finally confronts Helen Gravely, this is when she goes completely ballistic towards Luigi, as she thought she had this perfect plan to appease King Boo, but instead Luigi humiliated her in front of her idol, and so for one last ditch effort, she decides to face Luigi herself. And this is when the pre-ultimate boss fight comes into play, as you need to multitask with both Luigi and Gooigi for this boss, where it's divided into 2 separate areas, where Luigi is in the upper part of the area, as he needs to constantly avoid lasers, and Gooigi is the under part of the area, as he needs to disable the lasers for Luigi. It can be very challenging, which honestly makes it a lot more satisfying when you defeat Helen Gravely. And just like that, the brothers are finally reunited.
Yeah! Whoa! Oh? Oh yeah! Yeah! Way to
Mario!
go! Luigi!
Hey!
Oh.
Oh yeah!
Huh? Oh.
Come on, this way.
This way. Oh, let's go.
Alrighty, so with Mario free, he then heads to a secret passage behind one of the walls. But before Luigi enters the door, Egad warns him that that's going to be a one-way door, so if he enters, he cannot leave. But then suddenly, the reception for Egad then cuts ominously, as Luigi and Mario climbed all the way up to the hotel's rooftop. And I really like the scene where Mario just effortlessly climb up this building, while Luigi has to struggle his way through the long way. And what greets the brothers on top of the rooftop is Peach's portrait, and once Luigi was able to rescue her, that means the day is basically saved as now everyone is free. However, this is just a ruse for King Boo to trap everyone in a painting once again. As since Helen gravely failed him, he decides to take matter of his own hands, and literally captures Egad and Toads in a painting once again, and was about to capture the rest of them, but Polterpup pushes Luigi out of the way so only King Boo was able to capture Mario and Peach. And this easily pissed King Boo off a lot more. And I've gotta say, I kinda find it funny how Next Level Games unintentionally gave King Boo a character arc throughout this entire series. Like in the first game, King Boo was mostly after Mario and thought of Luigi as nothing more just an afterthought. In Luigi's Mansion 2, he wants revenge but still thinks Luigi as a joke, but in 3, he's just dead set on trying to capture this plumber. To the point where he literally grows the portrait into a massive size so he can suck up the entire building so he can capture Luigi. Like, this guy freaking hates this green dude. And I swear to God, I feel like Luigi was on the verge of a freaking pan attack with this scene. And as for the final boss itself, it is honestly pretty solid, as you basically need to just avoid the King Boo's attacks before you can capture him. And so when it's all said and done, as Luigi was able to capture King Boo once more, the entire building begins to collapse as Luigi begins to just embrace death. But luckily, Luigi was saved in the nick of time by Polterpup once more. And so, the day is saved as Luigi was able to both rescue his friends and escape in one piece. However, the device that was holding all the ghosts then suddenly breaks, and so all the ghosts have been freed. But it turns out that the ghosts were a lot more peaceful and they were only brainwashed by King Boo. Although, since the entire hotel has been destroyed, they're completely homeless. And so to rectify this, Professor Egad and everyone else decides to build them a brand new hotel. Which is honestly a pretty cool callback to the original Luigi's Mansion, where all the treasure you find goes into a brand new mansion that Egad builds. Although for this video, I mostly got the B rank hotel, which honestly I was very satisfied with. But yeah, so the day is saved, the ghosts have a brand new home, and Luigi and friends can finally go home. Concluding Luigi's Mansion 3. And overall, 6 years later, it still holds up pretty well. I honestly really adore on what this game tried to do, as it basically refines a lot from Dark Moon, while adding a lot more elements of the original game. And while I do kind of wish that they had a bit more elements of the original game, I cannot deny that this is a very good sequel, as it expands upon so many different aspects of the Luigi's Mansion series, and combine them together for a very stellar game for the Nintendo Switch. And I really gotta say this again, this game looks freaking beautiful. Like, keep in mind, if Next Level Games can make visuals this good on the Switch 1, imagine what they could do for Luigi's Mansion 4 on the Switch 2. But whatever the Luigi's Mansion series has in store in the future, I cannot wait. It is honestly very crazy how much the series has grown over the years, because it just started out as like that one niche GameCube title, but now it's considered as one of the much more bigger Nintendo franchises out there. And so I just hope that Nintendo Next Level Games keep up the momentum. But regardless, this as well as the other two Luigi's Mansion games are going to be games I'm going to be playing for a very, very long time. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!